Hello and welcome. My name is Leah Kopke. I'm a 3D motion design freelancer, and this is my 3D modeling podcast, Ambient 3D Animations. Today we are going to be painting some voxels, which is so exciting. We had gone through the whole process of 3D modeling a pinball machine in the last few episodes, and I went through how I put together a mood board as well as picked out some Pantone colors for the actual pinball machine. So we're going to be applying these to the pinball machine today, and I'm going to show you two different methods for doing that. So let's go ahead and jump into Cinema 4D and get started. Here we are inside of Cinema 4D. We'll have to do a little bit of reorganization in here for this model, so I'll show you how I go ahead and do that. And we're going to be using two methods here today. So let's go ahead and show the first one. So I know we have a lot going on in here. We 3D modeled quite a lot. So just to clean up my scene a little bit, I'm going to go into my layers, create a new layer, name this Construction Geo. And if you haven't already, save a version of your project because we're going to be making quite a few changes in this just to simplify the workflow of coloring this. But if you ever want to go back to your original version and maybe even create a pinball machine that isn't voxelized, it's nice to hold on to your previous work in a previous version. Alrighty, so I'm going to click and drag this in here. And I'm just going to hide this from the viewport, hide this from the render, and hide this from the manager. So I'm clicking those three buttons, and I just hid some of the construction geometry just to clean up our manager a little bit. We had a lot of stuff in here. And I'm going to be focusing on this part here. So actually, if I were to just solo everything in here, so I'm going to right click on this, select children, and solo this, you can see that this is what's included in all the elements here. What I want to do is I want to separate this part and this part and have those as separate models so that I can actually paint different colors on them using the brush inside of Cinema 4D. But then for things like this octopus and the legs, I'm going to texture those a little bit different. Instead of painting them, I'm going to apply a gradient to the octopus, and I'm going to just add a solid color to the legs. It's easiest to do this separating these out instead of having them all in the same volume builder. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and that might even be useful for animating this later on to separate out parts that we might want to animate separately. So I'm actually going to duplicate this. So I'm copying and pasting this now. I have two of these. This first one, I'm just going to hide everything in it, and I'm going to focus on deleting some things out of this first version. So things that I need to keep and get rid of, I just want the octopus and the legs in here. And we talked about how we're going to be simplifying the scene a little bit just to make it easier for me to paint. And I just find this helpful, but you can ultimately do what you'd like. I'm going to delete these bevels out of here because we really only need these if they're in mesh form and we're working with this in a mesh form instead of this voxelized version. And we're using the RKT Voxel mesher. I'll leave a link to this plugin below in case if you're interested in it. You can get it on Rocket Lasso's store. Now these legs at the bottom, I find it easier to work with them if I just right click on them and say connect objects and delete. That'll basically just turn this all into one mesh and simplify my scene, and I like things simplified a little bit. You'll lose a little bit of your flexibility there to make changes, and that's why I said save your previous version of your project, just in case if you want to go back to your old version, because that is destructive modeling, what I just did. Connect objects and delete. It's called destructive. I don't really like that word. but it's the terminology used in this industry. So we have the upper pinball machine body. I'm not working with that right now. Lower pinball machine, subtract. We don't need that. We don't need the cube. We don't need the lower pinball machine interior, lower pinball machine body. We just want the octopus and the legs. So we're set to go to add some textures to this. Now you'll see inside of our RKT Voxel mesher that we have this tool called the vertex color map. I'm going to change this from shell to cube because we are going to turn this into cloned cubes. And when we do that, when we hit the convert to cloner, we want this to all turn into cubes. But before I go through that whole process of adding the vertex color map and converting this to a cloner, I want to create some textures and add them to the octopus and the legs. So I'm going to actually create a legacy material here. And this will actually drive the new redshift material. So we'll go through this process together. It's going to be a little bit confusing the first time, but feel free to rewind and watch this as many times as you need. I'm going to click New Standard Material under Classic Materials. It's really old even though it says new. It's a legacy material in here. So we have this new material, and I made my life easier by having my InDesign file open with my Pantone colors. And I can just copy and paste these numbers and letters and all in here into Cinema 4D to add in the colors. So under our texture, I'd like to add in a gradient. This is going to drive the colors for the octopus. I'm going to double click on this little gradient box down here, and you'll see we have two knots we can adjust. I'm going to click on this one here. And now we can add in more colors. You'll see that I've already added in quite a few of the colors from my color scheme already. The one that I'm missing right now is the yellow, so we'll go through that together, and then you'll know how to copy and paste these into your scene for other colors. So I'm just going to copy this here. No, you know what? I'll make this bigger so that you can see what I'm copying and pasting. You can see we have the Pantone color, RGB values. I'm copying this here. Copy. And then I'm going to click on this and delete this and Control V to paste. Now we have yellow added in. We're going to go back to here, and I'm going to drag and drop this in here. If you want to create a new folder, you can click this button here and add in your colors there, and then you have a nice color palette to work on for the rest of this project. And you can just double click on these, and then you don't have to copy and paste RGB values or any of that anymore. So we have this set up. Very handy dandy. And we're going to need to apply this color. So this is the octopus. I think it's cute being pink. So on one side, I'm going to use this pink color, hit OK. And then on this other side, I'm going to use my other Pantone color that I chose. That is 649C. So I'm going to double click on this lightish blue-gray. And there we go. We have this very nice gradient in here. I'm going to rename this Pink Gradient A, just to name it something. And now that I have that done, I can drag and drop this guy to our octopus. We aren't going to see anything happen yet. First, I want to add another color to the legs, so I'm going to create a new color under Classic Materials, New Standard Material. And I'm going to add in a color this time. And this color, I'm going to double click on it. And we can choose from one of the colors we have already. I'm going to choose this very dark color here. If you're interested in knowing what Pantone color that is, that's this one here, Pantone 4147C. I really like those darkish purpley blue colors. Just to add some more depth to this, some more contrast and value, I added in this dark color in here, but it's perfect for the legs of this. So I'm going to name this material, since it's solid, Pantone 4147C. Okay, we're going to add this to our legs. Now you won't see anything happen here until we go into here. I need to choose vertex color map. I need to choose for the shader color, and you'll see a couple things happened. We got a color tag here, so that's useful. And you'll see this color tag is actually driving this material here, so this vertex attribute. I'm going to drag the octopus and the legs to the top here. Oh, whoops, I meant to choose for custom shader color. Okay. Where it says channel, change it to color. When it says custom shader, it has color down here, and that throws me off. You want this to say color where it says channel. Okay, so now we have our octopus in here, and we have our legs in here, and you can see some colors are happening. They aren't exactly going the way I'd like them to go, so we're going to go ahead and fix that. So here I'm going to click on this, and we're going to need to go in the tag tab and then change this from UVW mapping to flat. And I like to use this, and you'll be able to see it a little bit better if you go into this use texture mode up here. So I'm going to click on that. And now you'll see we have this plane in here. Now this plane is not going the way I'd like it to go. It's actually determining how this is being mapped across our object. So I'm going to do a couple things. I'm going to press T to scale this guy in here, make it a little bit smaller, and then I'm going to use E to move it down. I'm going to use R to rotate. I'm holding Shift so that I snap to 5-degree increments, and that is being controlled by my quantize settings in here. When you hold Shift, it enables quantize temporarily. So now we have this real cool gradient going from one side to another. And I may even scale this in a little bit more just to get this gradient a little bit tighter on this octopus. I think the gradient's fun, so I like to use it. And I can see that that's going all the way through from front to back, since we're just using a flat plane to texture this basically, and you can see it in here. Now that we have that done, we have that looking pretty good. I'm going to unsolo this, so we're going to get back some of our other stuff that we had previously. Now you'll see that our octopus has some eyes here, and we're using the symmetry for them. We set that up last time. We're going to need some colors here, but for this situation, since we don't need to use a classic shader for the voxels like we did for the RKT Voxel mesher tools, and these are just spheres and such, primitives, we can instead use just redshift material. So I'm going to walk through that a little bit. It's a little bit of a different process. So I went into create material standard. So now we have a regular standard redshift material. And there's a little bit of a gotcha in here for Pantone colors. So this took me a little minute to figure out because it has to do with color spaces, and I figured it out once when working on a client project. But basically, if I add in a node here and I add in a color node, you'd think that you could just, add your color in here, one of our Pantone colors, like this pink one, and that it would look right in here. But actually, if you compare the colors, there's something not right here. You'll see that this color of pink is way less saturated than this color. They look like totally different colors. So what is happening here? So you'd hope that somewhere in here you could select the color space, because that's really what's causing the issue. But there's no option to select color space in here. So I do a little bit of a workaround. Instead, I create textures inside of Cinema 4D that are just solid colors, because that's all I want is a solid pink color for these eyes, and I want them to look right. So I drag and drop this guy in here. And you'll see this is so much more saturated than that last pink that was incorrect. And you'll also notice that when you have this texture node in here, you can choose your color space, but it actually is on automatic and it shows the correct color space this time. So that little tip there will save you a ton of headaches if you're ever working with Pantone colors inside of Cinema 4D, because that's not super intuitive, that your colors won't be following through looking correct unless if you know these little tricks. So I'm going to put that into our color there to drive that. And now we have this lovely Pantone color, and I'm going to name this 205C, just so that I can remember as a future reference if I'd like. And then I can drag and drop this onto the eyes. But I want this to be on the eyelid. So I'm going to be careful that I do that. And then for the eye, I don't like the word eyeball, but that's technically what it is. I'm going to go into materials, create another standard material, and this one is going to be 4147C. I'm going to save my work so far because I don't want to start over if something crashes. And I'm going to open this up, do the same process as before, drag and drop my texture in here, use it to drive the color. And by the way, you can adjust the roughness and stuff in here. I'm just going to probably come back to that as we're doing lighting. And then you can drag and drop this on your octopus eye. And you can see he's starting to get some color and he's looking cute. So much better than gray to see your models in color. You get so used to 3D modeling in grayscale when you first start, because color can really change your perception of a model. And I learned that as an industrial designer, that you add color at the end because you need to focus on form first and then color later. Or at least that's what I was trained to do in design school. So that's what I do. But things just look so much better in color, where it's like a sigh of relief once you can finally get that in there. So now I want to add a blue to the starfish and the little seashell that the octopus is holding. So I think that'll be fun. We're going to actually do that with the legacy classic materials. So we're going to need a new standard material, but this is the legacy classic one. And we're going to drive this using a color. I think I'll just do a solid color instead of a gradient this time. We can change our minds later. This is all procedural in terms of coloring. And I'm going to name this, just so that I don't get confused, I'm actually going to name the older materials classic. And the new redshift materials, I'll just put RS at the beginning of them so that I know this is a redshift material. Because after a while, this is going to get confusing unless we name everything accordingly. And this material, I'm going to double click on the color here. I want to choose this blue color. And for those of you who want to match me with their colors, but I strongly suggest getting used to picking out your own colors and getting familiar with what you like and you don't like and getting a feel for it. I feel like color is just something where it's really good to practice on your own and put together your own colors and see See how they contrast. You have good contrast in value and hue and such in your color palette. But this is the color we're using now, is this blue. So I have that selected there. And I'm going to name it accordingly. This is 2995C. And this is a classic material. I like the word classic. It sounds much nicer than saying legacy. Well, maybe it's nice. Oh well, I'm going to go ahead and add this to the seashell and the so right now I'm going to click on the star right here. And I'm going to hit S while hovering over my manager, and you'll see it takes us directly to this. So we have this part here called Octopus Decorations. Now, I don't think I'm going to be rotating this or moving this around anymore. I'm pretty happy with where it is, and I feel comfortable just simplifying things by making this editable. Now, again, this is my workflow. You don't have to like doing this. You don't have to make things all editable, but I'm going to right-click on this and choose Connect Objects and Delete. I know that's kind of unique to me, but I like to just simplify. Once you get a ton of generators and stuff in here, it just gets really busy and it's a lot to visually take in. For me, I can go back to the procedural method in the older files if there's an emergency that requires that, but it's fine for right now. So right now we have the starfish and the seashell, and both of these I want to apply this blue to. So I'm just going to add this to both of these. And then we'll need to change this to cube, very important. And then we're going to enable vertex color map here. And we're going to change the channel, not the shader, change the channel to be color. And now you can see they're blue. And this is all being fed into this material here, this redshift material. So we're going to start to want to name these redshift vertex color materials because it's going to get complicated after a while if we don't. So this one, I'm just going to name this star, or you know what, I'll name it Octopus Decorations. Just keep this consistent because they really are kind of decorations for the octopus. Okay. And then this one, I'm going to name Octopus and Pinball Legs. Nice and neat and organized. And now what we haven't shown yet is converting this all over to be a cloner. So let's go ahead and do that. This one here, I'm going to name this Octopus and Legs. I know it's a lot of extra work, but it saves you a headache later. And then once we do that, let's go ahead and show what happens when we click Convert to Cloner. We do have this on cube, so when we convert this to a cloner, we will have a lovely cube in our cloner. And I'm going to name this Octopus and Legs. And now this is really fun because with this in cloner form, you can use fields and such to animate this like you would any other object in the MoGraph system. So that's why we're going through the process of turning this into clones, is for that animation purpose for later. Now for right now, we're just focusing on color, but it doesn't hurt to do some preparation for later. And you'll notice something else happened. So we got this plane object Speaking of effectors and colors, if you go into your MoGraph, you'll see one of your effectors is a plane object, and you can apply this to a cloner. And in this case, our parameter is not controlling the position, rotation, or scale for the plane effector. We are just driving the color. And that is how we're taking the color from the RKT Voxel mesher object and moving that over to the cloner. Is it is using that color data in our fields tab. So you can see that this automated dragging and dropping the vertex color tag from here into here. So the color from one object is driving the color in the other object. And I'm actually going to name this plane color octopus and legs. So you're getting to know the system here. And since this is going to be a very complicated scene by the end of it, I'm making another layer. We are dragging and dropping all of this here. I'm selecting the children from these and dragging and dropping all of those into here. And now they're all purple. Nice and neat and organized. We have everything that we need in here. And then if we ever feel like we have too many things showing up in our manager, we can hide these from our manager and just focus on other things in the scene without that other visual chaos. So layers are a huge help. I'm going to save where I'm at again. And just so that you get an idea of where this is going, I'm going to add in a Redshift Sun and Sky rig and hit Start IPR. Now this isn't a fancy lighting setup or anything like that. Could definitely do something a little bit more complex, but it's enough to give you an idea of the color and what this looks like rendered, and you can adjust the strength of the sun in here. Now the other useful thing about the cloner is you'll notice that it's hard to read these as individual cubes when they don't have surfaces on them. So if I go ahead and show this again in my manager and I go into the cube and I go into my attributes, I can turn on fillet and I can choose something a little bit better like 0.1, and you can see the individual cubes a little bit more when I use a 0.1 fillet, and it looks much better. Going to go ahead and hit save again and hide this from my manager, because I'm going to go back to here and I'm going to create a new layer focusing on the octopus decorations. And that's this up here. I'm going to drag it down to the bottom. So as you've probably guessed, this is set to cube. We're going to hit convert to cloner. We're going to get a cloner with a cube and a new plane. I'm going to change the cube to have a fillet of 0.1, or maybe even smaller. Actually, that works fine. We don't need to have as many subdivisions since this is so small. 2 is probably fine. We could even probably get away with 1, but this is okay for right now, just to have some more light reflect off of it. Do what works best for your computer. And then once we do that, we go through the naming process again. Now we select all of this fun stuff and we're gonna put it in our layer. Keep things nice and organized. Select children, drag and drop these guys in here. And I'm going to hide them again from my manager so that I can focus on other things in the scene. So that's the first method for painting your voxels. And let's talk about the second method. So I'm going to unhide this RKT Voxel Mesher pinball machine. We're getting everything back in here. And I'm going to delete some things from here. This is where we originally got the octopus. We no longer need that. This is where we got the legs. We no longer need the legs. We have those done. Now I want to split this probably into two parts, the lower pinball machine body and the upper pinball machine body. I no longer need these bevels, so I can delete that. You can see that I'm simplifying this whole scene in here. So I'm going to make actually a duplicate of this again, because we're splitting this further. That gives us greater flexibility while animating and also while painting. So this one I'm going to name upper, and this one is going to be lower. I'm going to create 2 layers for these. Pinball machine upper, pinball machine lower. I'm going to focus in on one at the time. Let's start with the lower. So I'm going to hide the upper, holding Control, double click. Now we're working with this here. Since we're working on the lower, we need to delete the upper from this because otherwise it'll just keep being calculated in here. And we don't really need that right now. We need to delete this pinball machine upper. We don't need the bevel in there either. So there we go. Now that's gone and we can focus in on this bottom portion. So right now we have this unsigned distance field, and this is useful because you can do those Boolean cuts in here. The one downside of this is that you end up with an inner and an outer shell. So we'll need to figure out that in a little bit. And I'll show you my workflow for fixing that because it's much easier to just paint one layer. So right now we have this as a shell. I'm going to create a copy of this. And this one is going to drive the color for the other one. So this one actually, I need to hit the C hotkey to make this whole thing editable. Now it's an editable mesh. You can see it here. If I solo it, you can go inside it, check it out, see what's happening on the inside, on the outside. And now we can go ahead and start separating this. So I'm going to go into polygon mode here. I'm going to use UF to actually select the polygons here. UF hotkey. But you'll notice that we're having a problem here. It looks like these are all connected and welded together, but they aren't. So what should we do? We need to weld them together. So I need to hold Alt while looking for the connect, and that will weld all of this together. I'm going to adjust the tolerance here a little bit. This is looking okay to me. And now with that, now we can hit C, and you'll see that if we select these, they're a little bit more welded together. It looks like it didn't connect all of them, so I'm going to adjust our tolerance a little bit more. Hit C again, and now this time I am selecting the whole surface here. And my hope is that I'm not selecting that inner surface, and it looks like I'm not, so that's good. They really are separate. I'm going to actually try selecting this inner surface here and deleting it because we only need to paint one surface to drive this. So I'm going to paint this exterior surface here. This is looking much better. Okay. So we have our form. I'm going to name this lower pinball machine body paint reference. Okay, now we're going to add in the color tag manually. So we're going to right click on this, go into our other tags, add in a vertex color map. You'll see this all turns black. But no worries here. The really, really fun and cool part is coming up. You'll see that we automatically have our paint tool open when we do that, and we can paint on this. But I also like to add the paint tool to my UI. So I'm actually hitting Shift C to open up this search here, and I'm going to search for paint tool. I'm going to drag and drop this guy in here. Now that I have this in here, I can select a color. And I can even grab a color from my selected colors in here. So we have a whole lot of options to work with. And I can begin just painting, drawing on this. And if you have a Cintiq, you could even do this with a pen. I do have a Cintiq, but I am not using it currently. And we're going to use the color from here to drive, as you've guessed, the cloner and the other one. So I'm actually going to unhide this and hide this one, holding Control, clicking those dots. And the reason why I'm doing that is just so that I can see this with my other colored elements in here, and that just makes it a whole lot easier. And this is where you can really start getting artistic in here. You can, yeah, just go ahead and start painting. So I pictured this bottom part being kind of like sand, so I'm going to go ahead and paint in some sand in here. You can adjust the size of your brush with the right and left brackets. And we're just filling in those vertices. Rotating around our object, adding in some more here. It's really important to make sure that you aren't missing any. Also looks kind of funny later. So we're just trying to fill these in and make ourselves a happy pinball machine. I'm going to choose another color from our color palette. Let's add in this light color here. That could be kind of like from the waves coming in. We could even do a little bit of a wave formation with this. And get in here. And there's something just really calming about this. I love it. It's just so calming getting in here. Getting these little vertices in here, coloring them in. Looks like I may want to move these legs over a little bit. So I'm hitting undo a little bit. I'm going to click on these. And I need to unhide them actually in here. So I have these symmetry legs in here. I'm going to use the selection here, use point selection, make sure that I have visible only turned off, and I'm going to choose these two legs on the right. I'm just going to shift them over a little bit. And I think that looks better. And that's another cool way you could animate this, is by animating actually the meshes underneath. That's something you could do. There's all different kinds of ways to creatively do this. But I think that that's looking better than what we had before. I'm going to continue painting this. I'm going to hide that again from my manager and my layers. And click on my color vertex map to get back to where we were before. So if you ever see your colors disappear, just click on your color vertex map again and they'll show up. We can go back to our paintbrush here and our attributes, pick out our color, and keep going. It might be helpful to turn on your lines here, garage shading lines, just so that you can see a little bit easier the edges here that you may have missed. If you hold Control, it also removes the color, but I prefer to just keep coloring on top of the existing color rather than removing color. Color on top of something you didn't mean to change the color of with another color, or just hit the undo button. That's typically what I do. And the nice thing about this pixelate style is that there really is some flexibility, and it doesn't have to be perfect because it is a little bit more focused on being expressive more than being this constrained, perfect art form, I feel. At least for me, that's how I feel about painting the voxels. You may feel a little bit differently, but that's my interpretation of it, is it's kind of like throwing paint onto a canvas and having fun. It doesn't feel serious to me like some other things I may work on for like a client or something like that. So I'm feeling pretty pleased with this right now. I mean, I can always go back and change it more. This is all flexible in that way. But just to show you how to move forward with this process, I'm going to start moving on. Okay, so we got this in here. We need to somehow transfer this over to our RKT Voxel Measure Pinball Lower. So I'm going to go ahead and unhide this guy here. And I'm going to change this to cube. I'm going to select Convert to Cloner. And you'll see we have a cloner with a bunch of cubes in it. And I'm going to name that pinball machine lower. Now the next important part is we're going to need to keep this selected, and we're going to need to go into our mode graph. And we talked a little bit about the plane effector earlier. We're going to select it now. And you'll see that by default, it affects the position because this whole thing had risen up. You can see it's way up there. We don't exactly want that now, do we? So in our parameters, we're going to turn off the position for our plane, and we're going to focus on the color, fields color. And for our fields color, we want to use our color tag. I'm going to want to do a few things to make this one no longer visible. I'm going to right click on it. I'm going to add in a render tag, and this is our one that we painted on. I'm going to change the display to visibility of 0. And then I'm also going to I'm going to click. I don't need to hit Control actually this time because there's no other ones in here, but I'm just clicking on this here and removing those lower polygons. And you'll see that it converted what we painted over to the individual cubes. And that's pretty cool to see. And then we can go ahead and do the same thing where we change the fillet to 0.1. And if we want to go back into this, we can actually continue painting on this here. So I noticed something that was a little bit confusing at first. I noticed that some areas looked completely black in here. Like I hadn't painted them, but then I realized that those were just shadows, because if I have a light in my scene and I hit start IPR, it actually does render correctly. You'll see that there's some black areas here and there, but that's just because I didn't reach all those vertices while painting. It's not because something was wrong with the texture, because you could see how this could be confusing when you're looking at it like this and you're like, why is this side all black? So actually, sometimes it's useful to change from garage shading to constant shading lines, and then you'll see the colors a little bit more easily without the influence of shadows. So that's just something to keep in mind. And now I can take a closer look at this again and see what I'm missing and fill those in. And then whenever I feel like, okay, this is in a better place and I'm done. Oh, there's some more over there. After I've made some changes, I can go ahead and turn down the visibility again, unsolo it, and then I get back everything else again. And it's really important to make sure that you have your color tag that you want to affect selected before you just start drawing. So I think that's looking better. I want to go ahead and take a look at what is causing this area here to be a little bit more black. I'm going to fill that in. Oh, this is interesting. So if you're having the issue that I was having where you're still getting this weird geometry, look inside of your model. I noticed that I have this floating part in here that was causing those that one area to turn black, and I couldn't figure it out because I kept painting over this. But what I actually need to do is delete that, because if I were to unsolo this and turn off the visibility of the paint layer, you can see that those are turning black, but it's really because if I solo this, that formation on the inside, and I'll turn back on our color tag. So what I can do is use UF, select that floating piece inside of here left over from our Boolean operations and such, and I can delete that. And then that should solve our issue. So if I go back in here to see my model on solo, you could see that's fixed. So that's how you go about troubleshooting some weird things like that, if you're running into them as well. Another fun thing that I found that I just thought was interesting is in the plane effector, you usually have this set to nearest for the vertex color to read the color that way. And it'll just turn out like this, kind of how you'd expect. But if you change this to index, you get this really kind of fun other effect to it. And I kind of like that too. So now I'm feeling undecided on which pattern I'm going to do, but for right now I'm going to keep this on nearest. I can change my mind later, but I just want to show you that fun experiment thing that I did. I thought was kind of cool looking. Okay. So now we've got our layers. We made our pinball machine lower layer, and that is done. So we just need to do some organizational maintenance here. I'll name this pinball machine lower. And with all of that, we can select everything, select the children of those nulls, and we'll put them all in here. And since we're done, we can turn it off. And we have our lovely model just as we need it. And we can focus on what we're still working on left over in here when we turn things off from our manager. We still have the upper pinball machine body to go. So let's go ahead and do that. And we can find that right over here. So I had copied this, if you remember, the upper and lower together. And now we just need the upper part, so I can delete all the lower from this copy, all the lower pinball body from this copy. So I don't need this, I don't need this, I don't need this, I just need this, I don't need the bevel, I don't need this cube. Now I literally just have the top part in here. And we can go through the same process as we did before with the lower pinball body, now for the top. So we're getting to be pros at this, getting really familiar with the tools. We're almost done. We've done a large portion. So working on the upper body of this will be very similar to what we did for the lower body of the machine. I really only need to work with this inside the volume builder, so I can remove anything else that's left over from what we had done previously. And now things are simplified within the volume builder. I just have this in there as we need. I'm going to make a copy of this, so now we have two. There's one that we're going to want to become the cloner and be set to cube for the geometry mode. The other one we're going to want to paint, and that one's going to need to be shell. So let's work on our one that needs to be set to shell first. And our volume builder I want to be set to fog. So we have shell and fog for this one here. And I can even go ahead and solo this just to double check my work and go inside of here and see how this looks. So you can see that it is nice and hollow on the inside. That's the goal. That's why I had set this to fog, because we're not using this one for Boolean operations. And if we choose fog, it's hollow on the inside. So that's why I chose this for this situation. So we have all of that in here. Now, before I make this editable, I'm going to put into a connect object again, so that it's easier to paint, because it welds those points together and makes it one nice clean mesh with welded points. Much easier to paint a surface like that. So now that we have all of that set up, I'm going to go ahead and hit the C hotkey, and I'm going to name this Pinball Machine Upper Paint. Now, as you've probably guessed, we're going to right click on this, go into our others tags, and add in a vertex color. And you should be getting pretty familiar with this at this point. We can now paint on this and consider what we'd like this to be. I'm going to unsolo this for a moment just to see what we're working with here. So I might be making the sand blast yellow. So what would contrast nicely is that dark blue that we used for the legs, I'm thinking. We don't have to use that through and through, but I think it'll be really nice up there around the text. So sometimes it helps to render to see the colors a little bit more clearly. I'm going to solo our mesh again, click on this color, and start painting our voxels. So there we go, we're getting some nice, beautiful voxels in here. So I'm just blocking in the colors really fast here. I may want the sides to be something else. I want to make sure that I'm getting these little corners that are hidden a little bit more. Those can be tricky, but it's really nice to get them filled in because if we do so, it just looks cleaner later. For this lower portion, I'm thinking it might look cool being kind of greeble-y, kind of that greeble look, texture look. So I'm just going to try that out up here and throw in some colors here and just see how this looks once we turn it into cubes, honestly, because I think that could be really fun. And we can get kind of playful in here. Okay. Let's see how this looks once we convert this over to the cloner. Haha. Okay. So we got this guy in here. We have this other one here. We need this one set to cube. And we're going to need to convert that to cloner. Now that we've done that, we need a plane effector to drive that cloner. I'm going to make sure that my lower pinball machine paint reference is also included in the correct layer. So I'm going to move that in here just to clean things up a little bit. And our new cloner I'm going to call upper pinball machine. With that selected, I need to go ahead and add in a plane effector. You can see it raised up the whole thing, and we don't quite need that. So I'm just going to click on this, and our parameters turn off position so that we aren't moving that, and instead we're focusing in on the color, and what we want to control the color is our color tag. So I drag and drop that guy in there, and I'm going to name this plane upper pinball machine. So we have everything nicely organized. Now I need to hide this, so I'm right clicking on the mesh that we used for the paint. I'm going to go into my render tags, choose display. I'm going to choose to use the visibility, set it to 0 so that's no longer showing up. And I'm going to hide it from the render by hitting this lower dot twice until it turns red. And you can see that greeble texture kind of run through to this. And I think that's kind of fun. Now, what we'll need for this cloner, of course, is some nice little fillets on this cube. So we'll turn on our fillets, add in 0.1, and hit File, Save, and Render to see what this thing looks like. I'm thinking this is looking fun, so I'll turn off the IPR. And I'll focus here in on the sandblast and the materials and things that are actually inside of here. So for sandblast, we have this guy up here. I'm going to select it, select the S button to find it. So I actually need to rename this Pinball Machine Details right now. And I want to see what I added into this RKT Voxel mesher. I might actually select the children of this and then just solo it so I could see everything that's in here. So you could see that we have quite a few objects in here. And for the purposes of this one, I don't think we need to paint them individually. But what I do want to do is just simplify this a little bit. I'm going to delete some of these construction objects I added in here because we no longer need them. And for the objects that are a little bit more complex in how they were built, I'm just going to simplify them for myself. By making them editable. So you can see this one has these kicker triangles in here. I don't know what those are called, but the pinball hits them and then there's a little lever that pushes them out against some, like a rubber band. But in this case, since it's all voxelated, I just did a very simplified version of that. We have some flippers here on the bottom, so that's this whole area down here. And I feel okay with those being one solid color. So I'm actually going to hit the C button to make that all editable. And maybe I won't connect these and delete them just in case if I change my mind about wanting them to all be the same color, because that is very possible that I'll do that. The text up here, I can go ahead and hit the C hotkey to make that editable too. I'm just making things editable so that they're easier to texture for myself. Going to right click on this. I don't want the letters to be different colors, so I'm going to make this all one object with connect objects and delete. If you want those individual letters to be editable, you can keep them separate. I chose to not do that for my project, so choose what works best for you and what you'd like to do. Now for these ramps, I'm just going to go ahead and make them editable as well. And name them accordingly. I'll go ahead and make this editable. going to turn this off here for a moment. I just want to see these three objects and see exactly what I'm working with here. So this is what we'd hit in order to get points for that ramp. So I'm okay with that all being one object to simplify it. I'm going to connect objects and delete. And if you ever change your mind about this being one object, you can also, in model mode, right click and choose polygon islands to objects, and it'll separate those meshes into separate parts if you change your mind and want to color them separately. But we're doing the same process as we did earlier, where we're adding the classic materials to these objects and using that to drive the redshift material. So I think this is looking better. I might keep these separately. So there's a little bit of cleanup work in here. But it's all worth it for the final result. Turn on the volume builder, turn on the RKT Voxel mesher. This is what we're left with. And we're going to start adding some colors in here. So what I want to do is create another classic material. And this one I'm going to make the pink color. So I'm going to go ahead and in texture add in the color. I can go ahead and click on this pink color here. And I can go ahead and name this 205C Classic. I can use this to drive the lower flippers and such. So I'm just holding Control and copying this to where I'd like it to appear. I can create another one of these, and I can make this the yellow one, rename it based on this Pantone color. So that's this one here. 127C. And I can add this to this area here. That's this guy. I'm going to make the ramps. They might be blue. I'll decide between blue or making them pink. I feel like there's a lot that's blue. Maybe they'll contrast better if I make them pink as well. So I'm going to try that, and I can always change it later. And then for the text, of course, I want that to be yellow. So what'll help us to visualize this and how this is looking is to go ahead and here, change this to cube, vertex color map. We're going to drive this using a color channel. I'm going to hit save. My computer lagged a little bit there. It's making me a little bit nervous that my computer is starting to lag. Okay, so there we go. I closed a couple other programs that were running in the background. And now we aren't lagging quite as much here. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. So we have our color tag added. That's looking good. And you can see that when we zoom in a little bit closer that we're actually seeing those colors show up. Sometimes it's easier to view them in the constant shading because you don't see all those lines. Or you can, of course, always double check it with the start IPR, and we'll wait for this to start rendering in a moment and get a nice little preview. So I think I'm feeling good about how this is looking so far. I'm going to turn off the IPR. And we still have these other elements in here, and this can actually be quite a bit of fun texturing something like this. So let's find our castle. I'm going to click on it, hit the S button to go ahead and find it. You can see that we have these different sections here, built a little bit differently. I'm going to actually duplicate the symmetry. One of the symmetry objects I'm going to keep the seashell in, and the other one I'm going to keep the cylinders in just to keep things organized. And so that I can texture these separately. Looks like I named this castle pillar. So I can actually make these both editable, and I'm going to go ahead and do that just to simplify things a little bit for myself. Connect objects and delete, connect objects and delete. Nice simplified version. Now I'm going to do a very similar process with this, except that I want what to be driving the voxels here to be a little bit of a different texture. So this will be fun. I'm going to add in a classic material, new standard material, but this time instead of using a gradient or a color, I want to use a noise. So I'm going to double click on this noise here, and I want to add in this yellow we chose, the Pantone color yellow. And I also want to add in the orange color. I'm going to see how that looks and if I like it or not. But I think that might be cool for the sand to have that kind of noise texture there. And we can play around with this more. If that isn't contrasted enough, we could even try one of the darker colors, but I'm going to try this first. So now we have that. This is going to be added on here, and on here. Now for the seashell, we can do something else fun like this gradient. And we can even choose something like a front flat or cubic for that and just see how that's looking for right now and if we like it or not. So now for this object, we need to change it to cube, vertex map color, change our channel to color. And now you'll see our noise is being applied to here. So that's fun. I think that looks cool. And we got our seashells in here. I'm going to just take a look at these. So it refreshed a little bit and the colors look a little bit better to me. I want to see how these look if I render them. So that's our sand castle. I feel like this it's pretty much working. I want to try moving this up to see how that'll look. This ramp just a little bit. I think that looks better when I move that up. I may reduce the voxel size ever so slightly and make it a little bit smaller. I think this is looking better too. We still have these treasure chests here. I'd like the starfish for the treasure chest to be blue. Oh, you know what? This is the part. So I need to, it helps to click on them, hit S, and then you can find it in here. So I found the star in here. And now I can make the star blue. I can even go ahead and hit C to make this editable. And that just simplifies it a little bit. The treasure chest, we could do another material similar to the noise. So I think I'll try that for the treasure chest, but we're going to use different colors in here and perhaps a different noise. It might be fun to try something like a cell noise. And then for the cell noise, I'm going to use this. And I'm going to, actually, yeah, I like the orange in there, the orange and the dark blue. So I'm going to use these both on the treasure chest. And then the same workflow as usual, cube, vertex color map, use the color. And now you can see that we have our treasure chest kind of colored in here. And it is floating a little bit, so I may lower this as a whole unit. And I'm going to enable the coordinate system so that's a little bit easier for me to use it, to move it directly up and down. I can even scale this up a little bit. And move this over. You could also go through the whole process of painting your treasure chest. So we could do a texture like this. I might make a copy of this and also try one that's a gradient because that feels a little bit busy to me. So maybe I'll try a gradient in here. I'll try this. And try that. Put this guy on here. change this from UVW mapping to flat. You'll see how large this plane is that's mapping on our surface, so I'm going to scale this way down. And then I'm going to rotate this using R. And I think that's a really kind of cool look to this, to have that gradient on the treasure chest. I can go ahead and move the star up, hit W or this to use the coordinate system for moving it. And I need to be in model mode to move that star. So I'll just move that up for a moment here. That's fun. I'm going to use the same textures over here on this other treasure chest, so I'm going to hit S to find it in here. Here's our secondary treasure chest. We can turn on our vertex color, make sure that's set to cube, and then we can actually copy this from here to the treasure chest. And then for the star, I'm going to hit C to make it editable. And add on the classic blue. Okay. And you'll notice that's not showing up because we still need to choose to use a color channel. And now it's showing up. So that's good. Oh my goodness, we have only a couple more things left to go. I'm going to set this to be this bright pink redshift color, these buttons here. Going to make these buttons pink as well. So this one I'm going to make cube, this button here, convert to cloner. And I had a Mo instance object of that, and I actually want the cloner to be in here, ideally. So this isn't all transferring over the way that I'd like to the instance. And we could try a couple ways to troubleshoot it, but then if it doesn't work, I'm just going to make a copy of this original one. So we can try render instance instead of multi-instance, and sometimes that helps fix things. Or we could try instance as well. Going to solo this. You can see that's still not really showing up. I'm going to delete that and just make a copy of this one over here. I'll name it button. I can make it the redshift pink color. Change our cubes to have some fillets, very small ones. We probably only need one subdivision for something that small. So the way that I'm going to make a copy of this is I'm going to say current state to object, and that will make this here, and then I'll say connect objects and delete, so that we just end up with one in here. So now we have a copy here. I can go ahead and move up the axis using enable axis. That's this button up here. We've been using it quite a bit. The hotkey for that is L. So I'll just line this guy up in here. Check it from various views. And now I'm going to go ahead and move this guy over here, rotate him around. There we go. Now we have buttons on each side. And we have these guys left, the bumpers. This one I'm going to set to cube. Vertex color map. Make sure to use color as our channel. And then from there, we could take a look at what's making up this bumper. We have a seashell. We can use our blue for that. We can also use our going to go ahead and make this editable. So those are all colored. And I'm going to say convert to cloner. That'll throw things off a little bit. I'm going to delete the Mo instance of that. And I'm going to name this bumper. I'm going to name the plain bumper. And I'm even going to name the tag bumper. Just make sure that the correct tag is in there. It is. So usually when the color isn't showing up, that's telling me that there's an error with what's showing up in the volume builder. So sometimes what helps is to take these out of the null, and then it just gets read a little bit more easily by Cinema 4D. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And you can see that that solved that problem there. I might need to adjust this to 0.15 because you can see we're losing some information below that looked funny. And this is looking better. Now, since we've done that, it'll be easier to make a copy of this. So I can say current state to object, but remember we like to add in fillets, so I'll go ahead and do that. 0.01. We could try to see what happens if we try to make an instance of this again, but last time that just didn't show up correctly. I'm going to try this instance instead of the Mo instance and just see how these tools play together to see if we can really get a copy in here. And it's not playing well with the with that. Another solution is that since this is all in the volume builder, we can copy all of this, hold control, and then we'll just end up having another duplicate over here. I can rotate it to make it a little bit more visually interesting, and I can make another copy and move it down here. And actually for this situation, I think it'd be good to turn off the world coordinate system and move this on down. So you may be saying, hey, Leah, we're losing our colors of the seashells here. And again, that comes down to the hierarchy here. So we'll want to move the seashells in this list to the top. And that should help fix it. So see, I moved the seashells to the top of the hierarchy, and now they're showing up. There we go. And I just want to make sure that this is lined up with the floor. So I'm going to move this down. Something like that. And now we have our bumpers in place. That is everything colored. Let's go ahead and hit start IPR so that we can see a preview of how this is looking. So here we are. You can see that the type contrasts nicely. We have our render in here. This was a huge amount of work to get this far in the project, so I feel really proud of this. I hope all of you feel proud of your projects too, if you're 3D modeling along with me. If you're just watching me as I do this, that's fine too. Whatever makes you happy. Oh, I see that I have the text going too far. We can go ahead and fix that though. Let me go ahead and find this. We have our text object. All we need to do to fix that is to basically scale this a little bit. I'm going to stop rendering here for a moment so that we don't risk crashing while we scale, at least as much. I'm going to solo this. I'll turn off the volume builder for a moment and the voxel mesher just so that this is easier to work with. Now, sometimes turning those off makes it easier to scale. I'll turn these back on again. It'll take a minute to think and recalculate all those voxels in there, so we'll wait a minute. But everything should update the way it was before, just scaled in. So this is looking better in the back now. Let's go ahead and hit the IPR. I just like to preview how things are looking. So that's looking better. So something that I'm noticing as I'm looking at this is that I'd like the sandcastle to stand out more, so I might make it a darker blue behind it, kind of like it's a little rocky area there. So that's why I find it helpful to do these moments where you preview. So again, we probably hid this in our layer, so I'm going to unhide it from here so that I can go ahead and find it again. And now I can just go back into my paintbrush, go back to that same process, because the painting process is all procedural. And if I'm having trouble seeing what I'm doing, I can even go into the display tag, turn up the visibility, solo this, and you can see that I accidentally created a new color vertex map, and that's actually a problem. So now I'll make sure that I have the color tag selected, and I meant to say color tag. I think that I said vertex color map. I mean just the color tag. Okay, so with that selected, now I can go ahead and paint this a little bit more easily. The color that I'd like. I'm going to do something like this. Maybe there's some rocks back here, and maybe I'll make it a little bit less even. But then this way, that castle will stand out a little bit more. And I think that could look real nice. So again, back in here, turn down the visibility, unsolo, and we'll see that automatically update. And now we have a little bit of a darker background behind the castle so that it contrasts more when we hit start IPR and we can actually see it a little bit better. Because we put so much work into it, it'd be a shame to just have it become lost color-wise. So I like that more. So I'm undecided if I would like to actually add in the glass top here or not. But I want to show you what that would look like in case if you're interested in it. So I just dropped in a cube, and then I can search for glass in here. And if we go under our materials, you'll see that there are some redshift materials in here. And we could choose one of the window options. I don't want one of the ones that say rain. So let's see what else is in here. There's this smudged option. I'm going to drag this in here and add it to this cube. And then that way, if you do decide that you would like to render this with some kind of glass on it, this is a way you can go about it. And you can see that you get some reflections in here. It's very subtle. And I'm undecided of if I like the glass in here or not, so I'd love to know your opinions. Part of me feels like pinball machines have the glass top, so maybe I should include it, but since this one is more of like this pixelated style, I don't know if it's necessary to really have the glass top in there because it's already a very stylized thing made up of cubes, and the glass kind of breaks that form language of being made up of cubes. So I'm just curious what all of you think about that and what your opinions are. But this is where this is at right now, and that's the back of it. Really fun project. And I feel like I've learned a lot doing this much. So that pretty much wraps up the painting phase of this. We're going to go ahead and animate this, so I hope you'll stay tuned for that. Again, if you watched until the end of this video, I appreciate you so much. If you'd like to be notified when more episodes come out, please hit subscribe, ring that bell, and if you like this, please give me a thumbs up. And if you make anything cool, I'd love to see it, so please share it in the comments or tell me about your projects. What are you working on? Are you doing something with the voxel mesh, or are you just 3D modeling something else for fun? And I'll talk to you soon. See you next time here on Ambient 3D Animations.